If you're an alcoholic and you are properly armed with facts about yourself, you are uniquely positioned to sponsor somebody else by taking them through the step. Another note on God, you're going to be all over the map when you hear about people's experiences with God. And I invite you, before you meet with your sponsee, to simply set aside your preconceived ideas about any of this stuff, okay? That you set aside. They may tell you that they don't believe in God, never have, they think God's an asshole, blah, blah, blah. And what's difficult for people who've been through this and know that, oh, no, there is a higher power. It's difficult for people to set that aside. But that's what I did when I was drinking.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy. A mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison.
Greetings, compadres. I'm really sorry about my voice. I really hope this turns out okay. I'm just recovering from some kind of weird, kids, they bring home everything under the sun. So I had a cold and this is the result. So hopefully it won't be too bad. So we have made it to the 12th step in a series that I'm doing called 12 Steps for Anyone Who Wants Them. And the idea of this series has been that I would hopefully try and explain to people who have heard of the 12 steps, but are not alcoholic, are not, involved in Narcotics Anonymous or Alcoholics Anonymous or any 12-step program, to hopefully explain to you what it means to be in a 12-step program and what these 12-step things are about. So this is material specifically taken from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 and 12, because that is my experience. That is what I know. I got sober in a 12-step group. And so this is the text that I personally know. So we're not going to be talking too much about nuanced things like meetings and specific opinions on this, that, and the other thing. I'll touch on some of that when it's appropriate, and I have touched on it when it's appropriate. But the main thing to keep in mind as we launch into this final step is I just need to send another reminder to anybody listening that through this whole series, I endorse 12-step programs. They do not endorse me. Okay, so that's important because a lot of people have very widely variable experiences with the 12 steps. And so you really can't say that this is a one-size-fits-all program. And so my interpretation of what I have learned comes from my perspective, my lens, and the same would be true for anybody else in a 12-step program. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, as far as the literature is concerned, as I touched on a second ago, I read a little bit from the 12 and 12, which is the 12 steps and 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, and also the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so anytime I read literature from that, what you're going to get is me drawing parallels from what I'm reading in the book, but General Service Office in New York from Alcoholics Anonymous has asked us to keep the literature intact. So, basically what that means is any translations of what I'm going to read to you are purely mine, but the text is the text, okay? And it's beautiful, in my opinion. Okay, so we started off by talking about powerlessness. That's step 1, and our lives becoming unmanageable. Then step 2, which is talking about coming to believe that there's a power greater than myself. Step 3, we talked about making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. And then in step 4, we took a personal inventory and we really looked at the root of why we behave the way we behave when we're drinking or gambling or over shopping, overeating, whatever it may be. Okay. And so step 5 was enlisting the help of a trusted friend or sponsor, therapist, priest, another individual who you can trust, and have that person help shed some light on any of those remaining questions that you may have about one's condition, right? Steps 6 and 7 are being willing to let go of any defects of character. These are things that we do that are similar to like the 7 deadly sins, lust, pride, envy, greed, blah, 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 anything that has roots of that. Okay, so we're trying to draw parallels and we're trying to see things that we haven't seen before, because drinking or any addictive behavior is simply a symptom of a greater root cause, right? Several greater root causes. And so steps 8 and 9 are about cleaning up our past. And then 10 was about continuing to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admit it. 11 was about seeking through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God. So here we are at step 12. And so step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. We tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So that's 2 things in there, right? So we've had a spiritual awakening now by the time we get to step 12, which I'm going to touch on what that means. But if you really want to get a firm idea, and a spiritual awakening, by the way, is going to look totally different for everybody. Some people literally have like a burning bush experience. Other people, it comes in what we call the educational variety, slowly through the 12 steps. By the time we get to the end, we barely realized, oh my gosh, it's happened. I now have had a spiritual awakening. By the way, I'm in a parking lot, so if you hear anything weird, I apologize, because anything could happen. Sorry if you can hear pages of my turning big book here. If you're watching, that's my big book. Post-it notes, lots of highlighting, blah, blah, blah. And so on page 567 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you can read about the spiritual experience. And it talks about basically a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism. And these personality changes have basically manifested themselves in a variety of different forms. Okay, so my spiritual experience, quote unquote, is going to look drastically different, maybe not drastically, but somewhat different from somebody else's. And that's okay. And so I wanted to start out by saying that because I think it's easy when listening to a podcast such as this one, or hearing somebody else's experience who you know, it's easy to go, oh, that person's wrong, or you're wrong, or he's wrong, she's wrong. There isn't a wrong. Everybody's spiritual experience is different. So basically, what having a spiritual experience is for me is the ability to not lead with my thoughts and feelings, which I felt like I had no control over when I was drinking. I just felt like this rag doll in the wind all the time, a victim to people, places, and things, right? And so we've come to the end of the road, as boys to men like to say, and I can't let go, right? Part of that song lyric. But really, here's the thing. For alcoholics in recovery who are really involved in the 12-step program and believe in the 12-step program in whatever form it has taken on for themselves, what we do is when we're done, we just start all over again at step 1, which sounds horrifying. I see fire trucks going by right now. So again, my apologies. I'm in a parking lot. So here's, and the reason for that is because There's never too much learning that we can do. There's never too many perspectives that we can hear, right? It's not a one and done. And so we take on sponsees, we lead them through the steps, we sit in meetings, we do it over and over again for a few reasons, but we continue to grow and learn throughout our lives about ourselves and how we can contribute positively to the stream of life forever. That's the plan. And depending on where we are in our life, we will read these same words over and over again, and we will hear completely different things. Or it's not uncommon to hear somebody say in a meeting, I've read the whole big book 75 times and I've never heard that before. Like I've never read I promise those words weren't there, which is a joke, right? Because of course the words were there. Big book was written in 1939. Excuse me. So of course they were there. But we hear them differently based on what's happening in our lives. What is the lens with which we are looking? Cough drop? Sorry. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm not going to read a lot from the 12 and 12, but I am going to read you the blurb from the front of the book. The reason I'm not going to read a lot from the 12 and 12 is because the 12th step in the 12 and 12 is super long, like long, long, long. And so in order to get the whole idea of what it's saying, you kind of do have to read the whole thing. But I'm here to tell you the 12th step, in my opinion, if I were to summarize it, it is about relationships and emotional sobriety. So by this point in time, we're obviously not drinking anymore. And so we've gotten a reprieve from all that craziness and chaos there. And so emotional sobriety is reacting calmly and safely to life and sanely. And so that's kind of the idea, is that we can make choices that don't screw up our future selves, that don't harm others. We have that ability when we're sober. It's emotional sobriety, right? And carrying the message, we'll get into that as well, but carrying the message is being able to share that experience with a sponsee or with somebody else who would like to go through the 12 steps. I'll also talk a little bit about what sponsorship is not, because it's gotten a little bit twisted over the years. That's an opinion. Okay. So in the 12 and 12, in the table of contents at the bottom of page 8, step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. All our affairs, daily life. Joy of living is a theme of the 12th step. Action is the key word, isn't it always? Giving that asks no reward. Love that has no price tag. What is spiritual awakening? Well, it's a new state of consciousness, and it is received as a free gift. Readiness to receive the gift lies in the practice of the 12 steps. So again, the action, the magnificent reality, rewards of helping other alcoholics, kinds of 12-step work, problems of 12-step work. What about the practice of these principles in all our affairs? Monotony, pain, and calamity turn to good use by practicing the steps. Isn't that beautiful? Difficulties of practice. I mean, all of this is so good. Placing spiritual growth first, domination and over-dependence, putting our lives on a give and take basis, dependence on God necessary to recover, alcoholics, domestic relationships in AA outlook upon material matters changes. So do feelings about personal importance. Those are those instincts I was telling you guys about in the 4th step, right? Emotional, social sobriety, financial peace, all of that, sex relations, right? Place in society when we demand more than our share, we get out of whack. Understanding is key to right attitudes, right action, key to good living. So you can read that in the 12 and 12. You can read all about it. Here's where the rubber meets the road, gang. We're going to start on page 89 in the big book. So while you're turning there, and I'm going to touch on this later on, but I'm going to share with you that the key, the absolute key is we want to move through the steps from fear to love. So being afraid of people, places, and things, being fearful of everything in our life, facing our life challenges uninebriated, right? to love, love in all of its purest forms, being okay with feeling uncomfortable, forgiving ourselves, loving others freely. That's the goal. Okay, am I going to do, chapter 7, working with others. Okay. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill, meaning not just physically ill, but spiritually ill, right? They're afraid. Life will take on new meaning. Here we go. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up among you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. These are the 12-step promises. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot in our lives. So then it talks about some specific on how to deal with somebody who is a drunk. And I'm not going to go too much into this, but it's valuable information. Okay, so if you want to read about it, go ahead and start on page 90 in working with others. Okay, and I think that if I put the 11 steps that I've just completed to work in my life, right? So I've admitted I'm powerless. I've come to believe that there's a power greater than myself, right? And I've turned my will and my life over to God as I understand God. And then I've done the inventory and I've shared about the inventory. I've looked at my character defects, looked at their root, right? Come willing for God to remove them. I've cleaned up my past, right? Now I live on this spiritual plane where every night I'm doing a 10th step in theory and asking God, what is it about my day that I could have done differently or better? And where have I made some progress? Right? And really tuning into that spiritual connection through step 11. Let's say I do that, right? That is now the plane that I've come to live on. That's how I'm doing my life now. So when you recover from alcoholism, it's a huge deal. And it uniquely puts you in a category that a lot of other people, including professionals in therapy and social workers, are not in. You are uniquely qualified to share with another alcoholic the experience of what it is like to be completely chained to the bottle, right? And how difficult that was to get over that, right? You are uniquely qualified. And so in the process of moving from fear to love, so in other words, when you look at another person, another drunk who's active in active alcoholism, right? It's a mirror, okay? You look at that person, and this is my experience, and I see myself, how I was in my cups. I was selfish. I didn't know top from bottom, right? I was restless, irritable, and discontent at all times. I get that way now, but I'm sober and it's far less painful. And I have tools, which makes all the difference, right? So as you look at somebody else and you are able to share your story, the biggest deal here is we're not going to evangelize. We're not going to try and capture somebody in the middle of the night and take them to rehab and drop them off when they're not ready. That's kind of an old school, if you've ever heard of some of those older programs like Synanon, that was a big thing. I'm not saying that doesn't work. I'm not saying people who do that are evil, but I am saying it's been my experience that it's better to meet somebody where they're at. If somebody reaches out to me in a drunken state or they're questioning their relationship with alcohol, I get them talking and sharing about their experience, their misery, right? And I get to share about mine because they've invited that. They want to hear it. So I share about mine. But I never try and say, like, this is the way you need to do it, right? And some of that is old threads from my church upbringing that you need to walk in and sort of, hellfire and brimstone somebody into seeing the light and turn or burn kind of thing. And I actually had to kind of unlearn some of that when I started sponsoring people. So, what we want to do is just be there to listen, to empathize, to share, and to be of service in whatever way we can that doesn't affect our personal boundaries and inner peace. So now I'm going to talk on what sponsorship is not, just to get a little bit of clarity around it. Many groups, many 12-step groups, as the fellowship grew over time, tried different things. At one point, they were contemplating opening a treatment center, but of course, you kind of have to look at who's funding that, right? And what are their expectations? What strings are attached, right? So over time, sponsorship kind of grew into this weird, murky, kind of like cloudy situation where eventually people who were involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, for example, and this is a traditions workshop, so I'm just touching lightly on this. It's not for us to pull apart when we're talking about the 12th step, but eventually people in Alcoholics Anonymous had to just say, you know what, like we're not doing that. We're going to remain autonomous. We're not going to have any big money thrown at Alcoholics Anonymous. We're going to be self-supporting, because that kind of shuts the door on people wanting their opinion and their will and their thoughts on how things should be done to be the chief activating experience of the 12 steps. So more recently, in the 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s, there have been groups that have come out with ideas about sponsorship, that sponsees need to take the cotton out of their ears. This is an old timers quote, and put it in their mouths, meaning just shut up and listen. And there have been people who sponsor other people by doing things like having their sponsees come over on Saturday and do yard work for them, clean their houses, do all kinds of work for them, like physical work. It is my opinion that is not sponsorship. That is taking advantage of people. But the idea and the heart behind it, supposedly, was that sponsees should be willing to go to any lengths to get sober, which I think is kind of a twisted cop-out. And the reason I say that is because growing up in the church, there are a lot of things that worked like that, right? Things that were hidden under a costume of, this is going to make you a better Christian. This is going to make you holier if you do this shit for me, basically. So I personally find that stuff dangerous. Asking as a sponsee, asking a sponsor for money, a place to live, all of that, I think is dangerous, very, very dangerous ground and territory. In the book here, if you consider reading like the rest of this chapter, it's going to tell you some other things. And in the 12 and 12 about, hey, your phone can ring at any time of the night. It talks about when Bill Wilson was sponsoring people in the early days, there was a guy who committed suicide in his house. It's talking about people who will do crazy things, light mattresses on fire. You may have to go get alcohol or drugs and subdue other people. And I want to remind you that this was all in the 30s. So this is before they had medical detox facilities where you could drop somebody off to sober them up. So now that we have the ability to do that, I don't recommend ever doing something where you're putting someone up in your house who's a stranger and volatile, and you have no idea what they're capable of. You have kids, they're not safe in your house. I mean, to me, that's not being a good steward of the knowledge that you have as a recovered alcoholic, right? Because your job is to protect your kids and your family and to take care of yourself so that you can be of service to others. And if you've got a family, that is a sacrifice that is not something you're being asked to make in sponsoring somebody else, right? That is my opinion. It's just kind of a checks and balances thing. Another thing to be wary of as a sponsor, in my opinion, is getting too involved in somebody else's life. I tell my sponsees before I start working with them that I'm not their therapist. I'm not their relationship counselor. I'm not their sex therapist. I'm not their bank. I'm certainly not going to or able to give them any kind of flight benefits. That's been asked of me. There are all kinds of things that people will ask for, or they'll want to test boundaries with you because they've gotten the wrong idea of what sponsorship is, right? Another thing that is my responsibility is to not get too involved in their lives. So a lot of sponsoring is asking them, how do you think that will turn out? What are your thoughts on that? What are some possible ways you might be able to handle that, right? What do you foresee if you play the movie all the way through to the ending credits, right? So what I want to be clear on is that sponsorship is taking people through the steps. It's not lay counseling. It's not sit down and take notes. I'm going to tell you the answers to life. None of that. If you are asked for your opinion on something, you can carefully, of course, give an opinion, but I try and really stay away from giving unsolicited advice, right? Dispensing advice to anybody. I can share about my experience, but a lot of times sponsors and sponsees wind up in these unhealthy, twisted relationships that were never what sponsorship was intended to be. Sponsorship was intended to be taking another person through the steps, period. So if you're an alcoholic and you are properly armed with facts about yourself, you are uniquely positioned to sponsor somebody else by taking them through the step. You know, another note on God, you're going to be all over the map when you hear about people's experiences with God. And I invite you, before you meet with your sponsee, to simply set aside your preconceived ideas about any of this stuff, okay? That you set aside. I mean, they may tell you that they don't believe in God, never have, they think God's an asshole, blah, blah, blah. And what's difficult for people who've been through this and know that, oh, no, there is a higher power. It's difficult for people to set that aside. But that's what I did when I was drinking, right? I was chasing my tail. And so now I don't have to do that anymore. And so I just wanted to say all that because I didn't want you to feel unqualified to sponsor somebody else if you ever choose to do that. But I wanted to be clear that it's just taking someone through the steps, that sometimes we make big deals out of these things that are not big deals, right? So yeah, as long as we're not getting involved in weird situations, where we're really crossing lines, then it's okay. It's okay even to kind of screw something up and then go back to your sponsee and apologize. That's all okay. I would caution you in two areas. The first one is setting up a regular meeting time with sponsees is super helpful, and don't deviate from that, because if you give a sponsee an inch, they will take a mile. So even if your day is flexible and can meet this afternoon instead of this morning or whatever it is you've decided on, I would say stick to what you said, because it's just at the beginning, especially, it's too easy to get caught up in trying to be helpful and trying to, have sort of a I'm going to save you mentality. If they're not ready, they're not ready. And nothing is going to get them sober. Nothing is going to keep them sober, right? That is none of your concern. Your concern is to take them through the steps. And you're offering that at, for example, Thursday mornings at 10 o'clock with them. The other thing that I would say is don't meet at your house until you see that this person is getting traction, is doing the work on their own, is going to meetings, is serious, and is truly sober. I keep watching this guy. Gosh, what the heck? Until that happens, I would not have them at my house. You just don't know. And I've heard too many stories of people inviting people over to do step work, all in the name of, being there for people and serving and doing service work, all good intentions, but it hasn't gone well, if you know what I'm saying. Okay, so now, with that being out of the way, how do I personally practice these principles in all my affairs? All these things that I've learned. If emotional sobriety is the next frontier, right? This is something that now that I have a spiritual connection, I should be able to do, right? Does that mean I'm Zen all the time and everything is peachy and I'm basically freaking Yoda? No, hardly, right? Because I get fatigued, because I get frustrated, because I have hormones, because I have a billion plates in my life, and maybe, only one of those is going seemingly well. There are many reasons why I have to stop. I have to meditate. I have to, turn my life and my will over to God and do brief step 3 before I go into a meeting. I can tell you that for me currently at this moment, one of those opportunities for growth, if you will call it that, is at my kids' high school. I do not walk into there anymore without meditating first. I mean, I gotta go a good 20 minutes early and sit in the parking lot and meditate and turn over any results of any meeting to God. And I have to zip myself up inside that boundary suit that I need to wear in order to protect myself, because I have old tapes that still exist from my past. Tapes of people in charge, people in the administration thinking they know what's right, thinking they know the best thing, being unwilling to put themselves in a parent's shoes, ignoring parents and stonewalling parents. Even though this is supposed to be a religious school, there are a lot of challenges. And I know about those challenges because I had those, because I was in the church for most of my life, right? So it's not like I'm like, ooh, I'm so much better now. It's just that I speak their language, and I also speak the language of the heart, which is a more open, free language of love. And I have moved from fear to love. It doesn't mean I operate in love at all times, but I get to choose my reactions, right? I can respond rather than react, and I'm not perfect at it, right? So I get to make amends with people. And particularly at that school, it's a one-sided amends. I make amends for my part, and I never get an amends from their part. I shouldn't say never. One time I did years ago, and I'll never forget. So, the deal is he finally parked. Yay. So the deal is that I get to practice these principles when I go throughout situations in my life that are your basic daily paper cuts, right? Standing in line at the grocery store and having a grandma, in front of you in the express lane with 75 items, and she's writing a check, right? The TSA, people cutting you off on the freeway, right? So these are the things where I just have to take a breath, stand back, pause for the next indicated step, the next right action, and just go, God, bless them, change me. Bless them, change me. Because I certainly don't know everything about every situation. I have very limited perspective, very limited information. I only know what I have experienced through my lens, what I have been exposed to learn, right? Is limited. And the same is true for somebody else. So what I see as misogyny can be what somebody else sees as correcting me, or the correct way to do something, or the biblical way to, you know what I mean? And I know that because I have that background knowledge that still can have a little bit of a tender spot because it was there for so long. So in having that knowledge and being able to see, it's my responsibility to choose how I'm going to respond in any given situation, but particularly with ones that I know, that I have background experience and knowledge with, and trying to have a spirit of walking into meetings like that and knowing everything that I know and not expecting them to behave differently, yet approaching the meeting with a spirit of openness and love. So it's another yes. And yes, I know that this background has been challenging for me before. Yes, I know what these people tend to do in their religion. Yes. And I also want to give the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't mean I'm going to be like, oh, for tonight, let's break bread together. This is because I have to have those protective boundaries. Sometimes people have had that opportunity and then proceeded to show me more of themselves. And when that has happened, and it's not good, right? When it's not good and you feel it physically in your body and you have almost a PTSD reaction, you know, hey, that's not a safe place for me. And so moving forward, now that I know better, I'm going to do better, right? More has been revealed. So this is something that in the morning, when you're doing your on awakening and reading pages 86 through 88, and you're giving your day over to God as you understand God, your higher power, this is how you go, okay, God, I'm asking you to give me your love so that I can operate from that place, but I don't check my brain at the door, right? I have space in my heart and in my life for both. You know why? Because I'm not drinking. And in my life, when I'm not drinking, I can do amazing things like drive at night, which is getting challenging because of my eyesight as a 47-year-old. So what I'm going to do, now that I've talked a little bit about carrying the message to another alcoholic and sponsoring and talking about practicing these principles in all my affairs, right, is I'm going to finish by reading page 164 in A Vision for You, which is the last chapter of what we call the program, which in 12-step communities means the actual work of the 12 steps, the actual program of the 12 steps. Okay, so page 164. So if you ever hear anybody in a meeting say something about, my sponsor told me all we have to do is go through the first 164 together, that's what that means. And then the rest of the big book is laid out in personal stories, which is what I read before I even got sober. I started reading them and I thought, oh shit, it's too close. They've got my number. I can't read these. Okay, this is the second paragraph down. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. Sidebar, you do not have to have sponsees to make a difference and to be serving in Alcoholics Anonymous, 12-step programs, or in life, right? All you got to do is be available, right? Be operating in that place of love and not fear. And your higher power will bring people into your life, whether you're sharing at a meeting, whether you're in line at a coffee shop and you striking up a conversation, whatever it is. If you look for it, you will see God bringing people in your life who you can make a connection with at some level. I just wanted to say that because I know for me as a stay-at-home mom sometimes too, when I had really little infants, I did a lot of meetings, quote unquote meetings on the phone. Talked to my sponsor a lot on the phone. I went to meetings too, but it's not the only way to serve other people. Sponsoring is not the only way. And some people really don't care for sponsoring. That is okay. All right, sorry. All right, so you've now asked God in your morning meditation what you can do for the man who's still sick. What can I do to be of service? The answers will come, the reading says, if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. What's the great fact? The great fact is that if you take care of your own self, and there's a Rumi quote that talks about this, that I'm paraphrasing here, but it says, I will take care of myself for you, and you take care of yourself for me. Meaning, I will take care of my own mental health and my own spiritual connection. You do the same for you. And then we meet in this beautiful field where we are two whole people who are practicing principles in our own lives, and now we are able to radiate and transmit and share and learn from each other. Really, truly, that is the heart of 12-step programs, right? We have moved from fear to love by the time we are at the 12th step. So the great fact is, it says here that great events will come to pass for me. Well, what's a great event? I mean, when I first got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm like, shit, a great event? Is that like Lollapalooza? Is that a concert? Is that a big party? What's a great event? Nope. We're talking the beauty of seeing flowers picked by a child. We're talking having your heart warmed by a conversation with somebody else. right? We're talking things that we could not see when we were drinking. And they may be massively wonderful things, and they may be really small things. But a great event for me is moving from fear to love in a situation with people, places, and things that used to have a hold over me, that used to have its, talons in me and really just consumed me, and things that I obsessed about. To have those things not lording over me is a great event. It's freedom, right? So great events will come to pass for you and countless others. Meaning, if I'm not doing this shit, if I'm not in the work, if I'm not allowing God to infiltrate my life in whatever way my higher power wants to, I'm of no use to you or anybody else in my life. My kids, I'm going to start controlling my kids. I'm going to start telling my husband what to do and how to do it, getting involved in his business. It's not my and also this was, another thing I wanted to point out. If you have issues with controlling people, places, and things, another great program is Al-Anon. That's for people who need to realize, like I did, that I can't change everybody else. I can only change me. Okay. So last paragraph of this, the work, page 164, it says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of the past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. The word trudge there means to walk with purpose. And so the picture that I want to leave you with after reading this last paragraph, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Well, that's steps 1, 2, and 3. This is like the summary, right? Admit your faults to him and your fellows. We did that in steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, right? Character defects and inventory. Clear away the wreckage of your past. That's 8 and 9, the amends process. Give freely of what you find and join us. That's what we do in steps 10, 11, and 12. We shall be with you in the Spirit. In the fellowship of the Spirit. So that is the unity of us coming together. And what I want to leave you with is, as we walked this path together, even in this series, from fear to love, we are still walking. That's the first thing to point out to you. And we are doing it arm in arm. We are doing it shoulder to shoulder. We do not have the same exact, prescription for a syllabus that's got to be X, Y, and Z. There's freedom within the 12 steps, right? There is the freedom to do it the way that we need to do it. It is we've talked about this before, is very spirit of the law, not letter of the law. But we are linked to each other through the 12 steps, and we're rowing in the same direction. And that is the point of the 12th step, is that we are moving from fear to love. We are carrying the message to other alcoholics when asked, right? We are trying to practice these principles in all our affairs. We're trying to take care of each other so we can take care of the other people in our lives and heal those relationships and have that emotional sobriety that I talked about as we began. I hope this is all fitting together for you. That emotional sobriety and healthy relationships is what we're going for. That all of these things coming together is our goal, and we're doing it shoulder to shoulder. We are trudging and walking with that purpose, which is emotional sobriety and healing relationships. So we're no longer page 52 in Alcoholics Anonymous, struggling with personal relationships and unable to be of real use to anybody. We are now at a place where we've moved from fear to love. And that never stops. Every day we pick up again. And when we need to course correct and get back on the love side instead of the fear side, we do that, and we maintain a healthy relationship with ourselves and humankind as much as we can. There are people who will stonewall us. There are people who will write us out of their lives. We can't control them. We're not going to force ourselves on them. We're going to release them from the obligation of our friendship or our working relationship or whatever it is, right? We have moved from fear to love as a result of the steps And that, my friends, is a spiritual awakening. And so with that in mind, I send you forth with love, with light, with every good thing, every good thing. And as we conclude the 12 steps for anyone who wants them, I hope you've gotten something out of this series that meant something to you. Remember to be kind, rewind. Thank you for the honor of your time. Take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy, a mum of eight's journey from jail to joy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. You can keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.